But we kick things off with the news that Ten Hag sacked as manager of Manchester United. Just a reminder, where he leaves the club, they sit 14th in the table, 9 games, 11 points, of course, aside. That lost yesterday against West Ham. For more on this, we welcome in Mario, who almost decided not to come on the show because of the treatment of Dutch managers in the Premier League. Unfortunately, we managed to persuade him.
Pull on Real Madrid.
But we start there with Mark Ogden. Mark, I suppose the obvious question is why today?
Well, I think the West Ham defeat of the weekend was the final straw. Obviously, they could have got rid of him any time this season after so many bad results. But the way I've been told is that they were looking to get 70 points this season, getting the top 4, 70 points. They were averaging 1.2 points per game. Last season, they finished with 60 points on 1.6 points per game. So they're doing even worse than last season. So having given him the summer, signed some players, started this season, they were hoping it would get better. I think they were kind of thinking that it couldn't be any worse than last season and that all the issues that he had last season would be overcome. It hasn't been the case. They've got worse and they've run out of patience. But the question is, why didn't they act 2 or 3 weeks ago when they could have done with an international break? Well, that may come to haunt them, but obviously they seem to be making progress with the replacement in Ruben Amorim. So perhaps the timing, the story may unfold in the next few days that they felt they had to wait to get the right guy in the club. But still, they just wasted more time by letting him hang on for the West Ham game. There was no sign of progression throughout this season, so I think they could have got rid of him at any time.
There was no sign of progression, Shaka, throughout his time. That's the problem. And you take a look at what happened, obviously, with the FA Cup final against Manchester City. That just seemed to be a massive band-aid that kind of made everyone forget, well, certainly those in charge forget enough to give him a new contract. But really, this was inevitable, wasn't it?
Absolutely, it was. First of all, as a former West Ham player, I'm kind of glad they waited until now. West Ham needed those 3 points. But I've said this throughout. I wouldn't have renewed Ten Hag's. I would have replaced Ten Hag after the FA Cup final. Yeah. And listen, I understand the sentiment that comes with winning the FA Cup final and maybe how that was viewed by the fan base. But really, when you look at the body of his work, particularly over the course of last season, particularly the back end of last season, there was just no argument to keeping, let alone enact that 1-year extension, which is, again, is even more bemusing to me as to why they do that, and then continue to back him financially in the way that they did. Listen, let me take that back. I guess if you decide to stay with him, you have to back him in the summer transfer window. But now all you've done is kind of add to the spending. Now you're going to have a new manager who's going to want to come in, who's going to have his own ideas about who he wants. Listen, if Amorim is announced as a new boss, at least he worked with Ugarte, so maybe that's not money all down the drain. But it's just one bad footballing decision after the next from the Manchester United leadership. And as a result, they now find themselves, well, a quarter way into the season, struggling in the table and not really sure what direction they're going here.
You've ruined the season. Season's done. You know, what's Manchester United aim now? Maybe retain the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup. No, that's it. That's where they stand now. And if they made a decision in the summer, at least you could start with a fresh start.
Yeah, and you know who else would have benefited from making that decision in the summer? Probably Erik Ten Hag. Walking out of the club saying, hey, I just won the FA Cup. Now he's walking out the back door. And obviously, at that point, he would have thought, oh, no. I can turn this around. Yeah. And every manager thinks that they can turn it around. So there has to be other people that are able to make sound decisions that are well thought out, with objectives in mind, and an actual objective evaluation of what the time of Erik Ten Hag had been up until that point. And even those people that are in that position were blinded by the FA Cup. Now, here we are, and nobody's surprised. We keep talking about the word progression. I think we should talk about regression when it comes to Manchester United and Erik Ten Hag. There was never a sign of progress. There were always signs of going backwards and backwards and further backwards and further backwards. And just when you thought you couldn't go even further back, there he goes, we're going even further back. Every hour and every day that Erik Ten Hag was in place as the manager of Manchester United meant that the gap between them and the top clubs in the Premier League, in fact, the top clubs anywhere, was getting wider and wider, bigger and bigger. And that difference and that gap was never going to come closer. This day has had to come a long time ago, but I suppose better late than never.
But I suppose also, Mario, we were kind of waiting for Manchester United to find their identity under Ten Hag as he obviously got that Ajax team together, which got him on the radar as to why he made that switch to Manchester United. Are you surprised that we never saw that in the end?
No, I clearly haven't seen it myself because, you know, I come out of that culture, and when he came over, people have to understand, he came out of a different way of playing when he came to Ajax. He adjusted himself really well, and I think that's where he built his success. But then coming to Man United, it's a different thing. I think sometimes, you know, in our country, it's sometimes that people look at players and coaches, and now they really understand how difficult it is. Because sometimes they don't realize, I think, sometimes they might take it like, oh, you know, you want to compare leagues. No, you can't. It's not the same thing. And I said that already in the beginning. But what happened to him is that he won the trophy, but then they kept him on because I think if they couldn't find a replacement, that's why they kept him on. But what they did then is they started to invest. And now the guys that they invested in are in a similar situation as he was, kind of unpredictable. I couldn't understand what they were planning with him. And I think as an individual, you will have that feeling too. So that's why now Man United is in a situation, and it's not going to be easy. Whoever comes in, you saw what happened at Chelsea. We were sitting here and talking about teams, and Man U is going to be a hell of a job too.
It's interesting, Mark, like we'll talk about the possibility of new manager in the moment, but whoever comes in, if you take a look at the starting 11, I think we discussed this on Extra Time last week, if you're building a team that can battle for the title, that can go head-to-head against Manchester City, against Arsenal, that can compete against Liverpool, how many of these players are you really hanging your hat on? Maybe Onana, maybe Fernandes, maybe Garnacho, but apart from that, there's very little evidence for any of the other players that they can come in and they can lift Manchester United to the level that we expect them to be. So how much is this down to recruitment and players, and does it matter who the new manager is?
It's the recurring problem at Man United, isn't it? The recruitment beyond the last 10 years since Alex Ferguson left has been really poor, and it's left them with the squad now that the new manager, whoever he is, walks in, and he'll have a squad of players that dates back. There's Louis van Gaal players in that squad. There's Jose Mourinho players in that squad. They haven't moved players on at the right time. It's not as much been about recruitment, which has been bad. It's also really about retaining players that haven't been good enough for too long. You know, you can put Diogo Dalot into that bracket. You know, he's still there, having been signed by Jose Mourinho. You know, he does okay. Well, we saw the miss at the weekend against West Ham, but he's not good enough for Man United. And you're right, there are so many players there that, you know, Ten Hag brought them in from teams all over the world, but most have played for Ajax, you know, at some point in their career, and they haven't been good enough. And I think it's going to be difficult. That the idea that United have got is that whoever comes in, and we think it's going to be Ruben Amorim, but if he comes in, he will. I imagine they will expect him to get more out of the squad he's got, and I think that's a fair ask. I think Ten Hag was out of his depth. He couldn't get the players to perform the way he wanted. I don't think he ever got to grips with the Premier League. I think applying the tactics that were successful in Holland with Ajax never worked in the Premier League. Arne Slot's found a way, but Erik Ten Hag never did. I think that the new manager will get more out of the players they've got, but you're right. I think ultimately there isn't enough quality in that squad to make them challengers even for the top four. That squad is desperately lacking in pace in key positions. Garnacho's got pace on the wing, fine, but there's no pace in the middle of the pitch. So even if Pep Guardiola came in tomorrow, he couldn't address that problem because he's got no pace in the middle of the pitch, and the window doesn't open until January, and you're not going to sign 4 or 5 players that can suddenly get around the pitch. So that's his problem, the new guy. He's got a lot of players who just aren't equipped physically or ability-wise to play for Man United, but that's going to take so long to change. Erik Ten Hag had a massive overhaul of players, you know. In 2.5 years, he got a lot of players out, he got a lot of players in, but ultimately the players he brought in, they just weren't good enough. There was nobody at the club, maybe apart from Steve McClaren, who was his assistant until he left in the summer, to tell him, with the experience of English football, to say, Erik, those players aren't going to cut it in English football. He was just allowed to sign players that weren't good enough. And it happened this summer. I was told today that the club weren't totally sold on signing Matthijs de Ligt and Nizam Mizrahi from Bayern Munich, but because they'd given Ten Hag a new deal and they wanted to show support in the manager, they backed his judgment that spending £50 million on those 2 defenders was worth it. Now, I think Mizrahi's been okay. I think he's been an improvement on Wan-Bissaka, but de Ligt, you know, his big reputation, but is he any better than Harry Maguire? He's not very quick. He's not very good with the ball at his feet, but He's coming on big wages for a big fee, and he's back to square one. He's just another player that's overpaid and costs too much money.
Can I just say that, and I understand what Huggy's saying, but this is not limited to the struggles of Manchester United in English football, and that these players cannot play in English football. Because when they go to play in Europa League, they struggle too, right? And so the struggles of Matthias de Ligt were well documented even before he showed up and walked through the door at Manchester United. And as he was going to Manchester United, the question was, wait. Did you not see him at Juventus? Did you not see him at Bayern Munich? This guy has been struggling. And so is this thought, again, and it comes from managers that think that they have the magic wand that somehow is going to touch the player and say, now you're going to get back to your best. Now, because you're here with me, you're going to perform at a high level. Mazraoui was a part-time player at Bayern Munich, riding the bench, easily, comfortably riding the bench. And you were expecting that he was going to be an answer for you. So when it comes to the struggles of these players that we're talking about, one, you chose these players to come. And two, they were struggling even before they came to you. And so this is part of, it's not just about the tactics or the lack of progression from this team. It's also the decisions that you participated and that you made as a manager of the club.
And wasn't Ineos supposed to change all of this? Okay, wasn't this the plan? The Glazers obviously give up a part of it. So Jim Radcliffe, the bicycle bloke as well, the guy who used to play for Blackburn, all would come together and they would save the day and they would change the recruitment. Yet what they've done, obviously, with hindsight, is absolutely stupid to give the keys of the Ferrari to a man who was almost inevitably going to drive it off the cliff.
Oh, they talked a good game. You're right, Dave Brailsford, the guy of, marginal gains. Well, there's been no marginal gains at Man United recently. Like Ali said, they've gone backwards. So there's a naivety there. I won't say cluelessness because that's probably a little bit harsh, but, when the summer came, they had the opportunity to move him on and get rid, and they didn't do it. So all this big talk about knowing what they were doing and bringing the right people in, they didn't do it. Now, if they suddenly change that around and move quickly and get Ruben Amorim, well done. That's a good move, and they've done that well because he is an up-and-coming coach. But they haven't shown the expertise that we were told they were going to have, and I think that is why United are in this kind of whirlpool of desperation. They're just going nowhere apart from down, and it's sad to see. But they've overseen this demise. They can't blame the Glazers now. A lot of the problems at United go back a long time, but from today onwards, this is all on Ineos because they've got rid of the manager now. They've made changes in the hierarchy. All of these decisions are now theirs. They have to own this. The new guy comes in, they have to own it. So it's now on them. No more excuses for Ineos.
Ruben Amorim,
sorry, I was just going to say, the trouble is, and I think Manchester United's transfer policy kind of highlights the issue in Manchester United, in that you're not quite sure who Manchester United are anymore. And while we think about Manchester United and maybe rightly so as one of the biggest clubs in world football, if commercial revenues are anything to go by, you're bringing in players, and while Ali's right to criticise Matthias de Ligt, but he's better than what you had. If you ask me, pound for pound, de Ligt is a better defender than Johnny Evans or Harry Maguire. But you're paying top dollar. You're paying Champions League semi-final dollar for a player who is better than mid-table Manchester United. And as a result, you have this kind of weird place that Manchester United are, paying top transfer dollar, paying top wages for players who, let's be honest, 14th is about right for where they are. And for all that of Ten Hag spending, and I was trying to do the math quickly, but in excess of 600 million according to...
You're our math guy in the show, by the
way. 600 million according to that graphic that we just had up. And Manchester United's biggest success story, certainly over the last 12 months, has been Kobe Mainoo, coming out of the academy. So, again, is this weird kind of, you just don't know. We don't know who Manchester United are, but more concerningly, I don't think anybody at that club, Ineos included, knows who they are.
It's a sad referendum, Shaq, when you say, and when you try to explain it and you say Matthias de Ligt is better than Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire. Well, yes. But
ironically, he hasn't been better over the last few games.
And Matthias de Ligt, by the way, was benched at Bayern Munich by Erik Dyer. Erik Dyer.
Tell us about Ruben Amorim then, Mark. Big favourite now, yeah, obviously, to be the new coach.
Yeah, well, I went over to Portugal to do a piece on Amorim last season when it looked like he was going to go to Liverpool, and that didn't happen. So, but he is an up-and-coming rising star as a coach. He's 39 years old. He's won back-to-back titles with Sporting. They're unbeaten this season at the top of the league, unbeaten in the Champions League. So he really is a guy to watch. But there's two issues with Amorim that I would be a little bit concerned about if I was a United fan. First of all, he's been linked with a lot of clubs and he never leaves Sporting. Liverpool, Bayern, Barcelona, West Ham last season, all had a look at him, none took it on. The second one is that he's absolutely wedded to three at the back. He plays 3-4-3, and that is what he does. That is his system. So, you know, we've seen Antonio Conte was successful in the Premier League with three at the back, but there's not been many others. And if you're going to hire a guy that's got a big reputation, he's got a bit of Mourinho about him. He's got a bit of swagger. He likes himself and he backs it up. But if you're going to Man United mid-season and you're suddenly saying to that back four, we're going to play three at the back now, will it get better quickly or will it get worse quickly? I think long-term it will be a great appointment, but I just think parachute him in mid-season with that squad of players, it could be a difficult situation because I don't know how you play three at the back with those players. I mean, look, you've got fullbacks who like to attack. Luke Shaw, if he's ever fit, could be a great left wing back, but those centre-halves, three at the back, I don't know. I'd ask the guys about that one.
Is he going to get the job, Mark?
I'd be very surprised if he didn't get the job. I think an element of this is that he's earned the right to get a big job now. He is one of he's the next on the rank in terms of the coaches in Europe. But one slight fly in the ointment is that 2 weeks ago, Hugo Viana, the sporting director at Sporting, he will move to Man City at the end of the season to replace Chiqui Begiristain. And the talk in Portugal last week was that Amorim is being lined up to replace Pep Guardiola at Man City. Now, obviously, Pep Guardiola right now is still the Man City manager. So is this a ploy by Amorim to find out what's going on with Pep at City and Man United being used? Or has Amorim found out that Pep isn't leaving Man City and if he's going to get a chance in the Premier League, it's now with Man United, so take it. But I do think that the Man City cloud is one that United need to be wary of because Hugo Viana is a big part of what happened at Sporting with Ruben Amorim, and he's gone to Man City. So that's part of the equation.
Can Amorim play up front, Mark? Because let's face it, a big problem that United have, they've got no one to put the ball in the back of the net. You know, stats are stats or whatever. But when it comes to chances created, you know, you look at the fact that they're the fourth best in the Premier League and they can't find the back of the net. 105 chances, 8 goals. Like, we talk about personnel, you talk about whoever it is that comes in, but that's a huge problem that United have to face. Xerxes, you know, Rasmus Højlund, Marcus Rashford,
It's a problem solely of their own making, isn't it? I mean, they spent £110 million on Højlund and Xerxes over the last 2 summers, right? Xerxes, I don't think he'll ever make it. He's not quick enough. He's not dynamic enough to score goals. And Højlund, he might come good, but he's not ready right now. But, you know, the one plus if you're looking at Ruben Amorim coming in is Victor Gyökeres at Sporting has been a sensation in the last 18 months at Sporting Lisbon. You know, he was at Coventry City prior to that. And Amorim's taken him to Sporting and turned him into one of the most sought-after strikers in Europe. So maybe there's a magic touch there. Maybe he knows how to get the best out of strikers. So perhaps Amorim comes in, he turns Højlund into Haaland. Who knows? That's what they're hoping for anyway.
Do you agree? Do you think that you could see Rasmus Højlund becoming Erling Haaland, as Mark Ogden says, it's definitely going to happen, Mario, when the new manager comes in?
No, I think. Look, no, that is never going to happen. But I'm just saying, like, you understand. Look, we have to be honest. When we look at the game, we have to be realistic. I think when a new coach comes in, it's the character that's going to talk, and that is one of the key things. You understand, for the ones that are staying on, because you know what you guys highlighted. You understand. You know, you talked about De Ligt and all those guys. If he's going to play 3 at the back, it's also going to be tricky for them, eh? So you come to a new coach, you come to a new club. I think the biggest issue at Man United's been, you know, since Ten Hag been there, he has always been building his team. And there has to come a moment in football where you say, stop, this is what we have and now we're going to work on this. And I think I've never seen that at Man United. I have watched Man United, but he have never stopped building. And I think that became the problem. Because every time there was a new player, you talk about the middle of the park, a new player had to come in. You talk about the back end, okay, 2 defenders come in. You're right back, then you know, like De Ligt come in, center defender. So every time they were almost like, it's like a tap was open and you try to, you know, handle the leaking from the tap. And I think that was the biggest problem at Man United, because that's why they never made it to become a proper team that really could compete against anybody, because that's what we're used to. And sometimes we maybe act a little spoiled because Man United always been a top team, and now seeing them fall, everybody's shocked. Not even a Man United fan. Like, I'm not a Man United fan, but I'm still watching and going like, what is happening there? And that is